Hello, I'm Delta and Destiny, and welcome back to another theory video. If you've stumbled onto this video and clicked on it, then I'm gonna assume that you've played the new chapters of Deltarune. For those who haven't, then I warn you, spoilers ahead. So, the Eggman. No, not him. I mean the Eggman from Deltarune. The mysterious character who hides behind trees in this weird limbo space, giving us these important yet not too unimportant eggs. Who is he? What is he? What purpose does he serve? Well, let's figure that out. I first want to answer the question many people have been asking. Who is he? Well, from what I've seen, I feel like the most logical answer is the man himself, W.D. Gaster. He's one of the most compelling and mysterious figures in the entire Undertale and Deltarune community. Toby, in Undertale, barely ever explores his character, yet everyone goes nuts over him whenever we see anything related to him. All we got were little lore snippets that were only accessible through random chance. It only makes sense, then, for Toby to reintroduce this character and fulfill the fandom's wishes. So, it's not surprising that when the Eggman character was discovered, the connections between Gaster and the Eggman started piling up. Personally, when I first discovered the Egg Room, something about it felt off. The way it works, the mechanics, the odds, the location, it all felt deliberate. A room between rooms, only accessed through chance. A man, alone in a room, waiting. Sound familiar? 'Cause this isn't the first time we've seen something like that. Just like in Deltarune, Undertale has this weird area that has a chance to spawn in a room between other rooms. In order to get to this room in Undertale, it relies on something referred to as a fun value, a random chance value that is calculated at the beginning of the game. It's quite literally a room that relies on gambling. The most notable thing about this room is who resides within it. The Mystery Man sprite, the person who is most likely to be W.D. Gaster. The sprite literally being referred to as the Mystery Man in the files is very similar to how the person behind the tree is described, simply a man. But the parallels don't end there. Notice how the room layout is exactly the same as the Egg Room from Chapter 1, a tight pathway that leads upwards and widens out into a larger area. While the colors are different and the other chapters' Egg Rooms don't follow this pattern, it is still something that I felt like I needed to point out. Another interesting thing is that after interacting with the Mystery Man sprite, he disappears with that funny little sound that we all know and love. The Eggman does something almost of the exact same caliber. He disappears after you interact with him, no matter if you choose yes or no. One of the most compelling arguments that the Eggman is Gaster is that it's already technically foreshadowed within the basic Undertale game, without needing the effect of a fun value. I've seen this point forgotten so much, it's barely mentioned anywhere. You see, there are flavor text lines from the True Lab in Undertale. If you go into the fridge room before turning on the ventilation room where you encounter Endogyny, the room is full of dense fog. You can interact with some objects in the room, and two of them provide the flavor text as follows. There's something here. Feels like a tree, ripe with delicious fruit. And there's something here. Something in the shape of a man. This is a direct reference to what we get in Deltarune. Simply a man and a tree. It shows us that Toby was planning all this way before Deltarune was even conceived. If Toby had already conceived the idea of the Eggman for Deltarune, then it's interesting that he put it in the True Lab. the place where Gaster was thought to have started his experiments with creating the core. This is what really convinced me of Gaster, or the Mystery Man sprite at least, being the Eggman. One of the biggest counter-arguments I have seen is that people don't believe Gaster would speak like this. Having him be this silly little character behind a tree giving you eggs seems too random and goofy for a character we've seen as a large, foreboding figure. Yet, in my personal opinion, I see this as a separate part of Gaster. The beginning song of the game is called Another Hymn, which is callback to Gaster's theme, whose file name is hymn.ogg. This implies that there are possibly many Gasters out there, after falling into his own creation and shattering across time and space. Either way, this seems to be a more silly side to his character. This could even be the true side of Gaster before he fell into his own creation. His broken version is the more clinical, scientific creature we see speak to us in the beginning moments of the game, while this is his normal self, him being him. Another solid piece of evidence that Gaster is likely the Eggman is that the Eggman uses the phrase, "Deltarune will be waiting." It's a line that reminds me of how Gaster speaks about Deltarune, like it's something that exists as a reality, not just a story or a prophecy. Gaster, along with the philosophers in Chapter 4, are the only characters so far who speak of it like it's a game, whether it's in the metaphysical sense during the Twitter takeover, or at the end of Chapter 4 where Gaster refers to Deltarune as my Deltarune. He speaks of it like it's a child for us to accept, or something that's alive, breathing, and living. No one else in the game seems to do this. But moving on, I still want to leave the opinion open that Gaster may not be the Eggman. From everything that I've seen, I personally came to this conclusion. However, there is still a possibility he isn't. Thankfully, this speculation about who the Eggman is won't affect the question I intend to answer next. What do the Egg Rooms and the Eggman represent? Well, from everything that I've seen, I think the eggs are meant to represent fragments of a memory that happened to Chris in the past. Let's see why. After doing the long and confusing side quest to get to the Eggman in Chapter 3 and talking to him, the dialogue he presents seems to represent someone or something from the past. He explores topics of the past and seems to have expansive knowledge on it, talking about how society developed, how before we came into the picture, the world was covered in water, dinosaurs ruled, and then an ice age struck. Not only that, but the place we find him in Chapter 3 is based on old retro NES-style games. It's a green area with no colors, with a pixel art style that's even more pixelated than Deltarune's. There are also little NES Rudens scattered throughout the area, who speak of not recognizing Chris since they've grown, and even mention how Chris created these Rudens to try and cheat in a game long ago. All these things speak of something in the past, maybe not directly tied to the incident I'm going to talk about, but it's still part of a wider exploration of history and memory. It's also fitting that the entirety of Chapter 3 is nostalgia bait. From the Zelda knockoffs to the poor 3D software used back then, it makes sense for this secret location of Chapter 3 to include more nods to that nostalgic feeling. Another hint that this egg room is meant to represent the past is that when we enter it, Chris is not in their Dark World sprite. They're in their Light World sprite at first. As soon as I saw this, I was really confused. But when I looked at it through the lens of the egg room representing the past, it suddenly made sense. If the past is a time before the Dark World adventures occurred, then Chris appearing in their Light World form fits perfectly. What's even more interesting is that after receiving the egg in Chapter 3, Chris's sprite changes back to their Dark World form. It's almost like they're regaining something. The egg seems to patch a part of the game, almost like it's patching a part of Chris's memory. If these eggs are piecing a story together for us, the player, then why are they symbolized through eggs? Well, in the more symbolic meaning of eggs, they commonly represent new life or resurrection. In this case, the eggs could be representing the resurrection of Chris's memory. However, another great point is that the eggs are reminiscent of Easter eggs in the game, things you have to go out of your way to find. This aligns with the idea of Chris having to search for their memories. They're lost in the game and must be recovered. They could almost act like pieces of code that need to be collected to form one complete memory. The eggs are even referred to as code in one of Noelle's blog posts about Cat Petters 2. She describes all the pets as code. The Pippus resulted from her placing Spamton's corrupted email into the text is even a pet. Since we know another weird pet appeared in her game, seemingly one of Deltarune's eggs, because she describes it as a normal egg that you couldn't get rid of or throw away, one that makes a strange noise when used. This is exactly like the egg Chris obtains. Since this egg is also referred to as a pet, we can tell it, too, is represented as code. Well, I don't believe that the egg Noelle found in Cat Petters 2 is the same one as in-game. They do seem to mirror each other, both as strange, persistent bits of broken and strange code. A fellow Deltarune theorist, named Foxworthy, pointed out that the eggs almost behave like data contained in computer memory. Computers use something called a pointer to mark the location in memory where data is saved. If you have a pointer to a memory location, you can read what's there. In this case, the egg rooms seem to be the pointer, and the eggs are the data. If the eggs are part of the memory, then Chris going to these pointer rooms could be them slowly regaining that code. Them finding the eggs in these rooms would allow them to get that memory back and slowly piece it together. With that in mind, how does the egg room in Chapter 4 follow this pattern? Well, once again, the Chapter 4 egg room seems to support this idea of returning to the past. The room on the other side of the egg window contains a prophecy. It shows a house with 2 trees and one word plastered above it. Roots. While it's tempting to think roots here refers to the trees, it's more likely connected to history, origin, and where you came from. It seems to be pointing towards the roots of what happened in Deltarune's past, and Chris uncovering their origin and trauma. The form that Chapter 4's egg room takes is also important. It's a hospital. More specifically, one suited for therapy. When you enter the room with the tree painting, you have to stumble around until you find the easel. Once you interact with it, this happens.
Well, there is a canvas here. Will you draw? Yes. Chris picked up a pencil. They began by sketching what they had seen behind the tree. But as they sketched, the line began to err as if the pencil had lost its way, so they started again, drawing over the lines they had already made. Many times they would suddenly halt, or the pencil drifted into a new drawing, so they started over again. Through many repetitions, their movements became faster and smoother, until without looking, they had completed a sketch in a single wild line. In the end, as a result of laying the sketches on top of each other, the surface of the canvas was nothing more than a monochrome smear. Next, a tree was painted over it. Painted over everything, leaving nothing but a simple still life. After all, there wasn't anything to look at in the room besides a single tree. Chris got up. It seemed the painting was complete. But their hand, smudged with graphite, was still moving as if to trace some unseen shape. An egg was picked up from a nearby easel.
Here, Chris tries to draw the man over and over again, but fails. This ties back to the idea of the egg rooms being like computer pointers. You see, if the data that is getting used is removed, then the pointer points to what is called garbage data. Data from a different program. It's very similar to how Gaster is associated with garbage noise, the result of garbage data being turned into sound by a speaker or a phone. This is what is happening to Chris here. They don't have the memory of what happened, so they can't draw the man. And here, this answers the question of what the man is. It's clearly a representation of Chris's trauma, something Chris is trying to forget, yet it's burned into their mind. It's interesting that once Chris receives the egg, the man disappears, almost as if they're coming to terms with something, dealing with the trauma. In this sense, it's very fitting that the Chapter 4 egg room takes the form of a therapy hospital. It's very common for people to try and draw their agony so they can come to terms with it and face it head on and make it something physical that we can see. But here, Chris doesn't just draw their pain. They cover it up. They paint a tree over it, almost as if they're trying to hide the agony and the trauma they see. I don't know that much about therapy places, but I don't think drawing over the agony is the best idea. Coming to terms with it is what I'd recommend, but covering it up and trying to forget it isn't the best thing to do. It's even more notable that even after painting over their drawing, their hands are stained with graphite. And going over to the sink and trying to wash it off doesn't work. It reminds me of guilt, like the phrase blood on your hands or caught red-handed. Chris here wants to forget what happened, but they can't. It all ties back to the central message of the game. Don't forget. So, if Chris is trying to block out a memory, one that we, the player, are helping Chris regain, then what is this memory Chris is trying to block out?
Well, to me, it seems to be the thing affecting everyone in Hometown. The disappearance of December Holiday. Chris seemed to have a close relationship to Des. They played music together, and were overall good friends. Des might have even been the one to give Chris their first knife. Now that we know Des is the knight, it can be assumed that something happened to her. But what did happen? Did Chris witness this event? Was this what caused the horrible memory that the Eggman is taking the form of? And this concludes my theory. In summary, the Eggman is a representation of the memory of the disappearance of December Holiday, an event that Chris witnessed and can't forget.
And that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I do want to let you know I have a Discord that is linked down in the description, along with my Bluesky account where I post all my art. Once again, if you liked this video, feel free to like and subscribe. It would be very much appreciated. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video.